All right, here we have it. This is my top 10 list of alternative bands from the 1980s. But before we get into that list, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and afterwards leave your comments. I want to know what your favorite bands were from the 1980s. So, going in reverse order, we'll start with band number 10. Band number 10 for me was XTC. That was Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding's band. Um, Wrote catchy songs. Had sensible lyrics, and they're kind of crafty in the way they ultimately designed their songs. The hook for them, for them, was the release of the album English Settlement. It was a double album. It came out, and when I heard it, it just blew me away. I thought this is really amazing. I had heard Drums and Wires before that, but I thought there was really a lot of good stuff on this. And for a double album, it stood up from start to finish. And I thought that XTC was really a great band. Unfortunately, they didn't do a lot of touring. I think that was more because of Andy Partridge's issues about not being able to tour. But then eventually they came out with the album with Skylarking. I think that was produced by Todd Rundgren, and obviously that had the big hit Dear God on it, which I guess got them, in the alternative arena, got them some significant airplay. They also had a kind of like a spin-off band. It was called Dukes of Stratosphere, and I think they got into more psychedelic stuff. I never really got into the Dukes of Stratosphere, but XTC, one of my top 10 alternative bands from the 1980s. Now, here's another one off the beaten track, coming in at number 9, a Philly band called Executive Slacks. And Executive Slacks was led by Matt Morello. As I said, they were a Philly band. Incredibly kind of grunge, industrial music. You could really make the case that Executive Slacks was a precursor to influencing bands like Skinny Puppy and Ministry and Nine Inch Nails. They had a couple of albums that they put out. There was a song called Nausea that was great, and they also did a cover of rock and roll anthem, Stadium Anthem, that was really just electrified. So if you can find something from them on YouTube, go ahead and search them out. Executive Slacks, coming in at number 9. Now rolling along to number 8 and staying in that heavy guitar sound. We have a band called Killing Joke. Killing Joke was Jazz Coleman, 1Z, and a guitar player called Youth. I think Youth actually produced one of Executive Slacks' albums. But Jazz Coleman and Youth under the banner of Killing Joke. Deep, dark, heavy guitar sound. They had a song called 80's, which was kind of like a alternative underground dance club hit. But most of their stuff before that was really kind of heavy, grungy, dark, and it's a sound that I really kind of like. So they're my number 8 band, Killing Joke. Moves us on to band number 7, staying in that same underground dark realm, band called Bauhaus, led by Peter Murphy, who had these exquisite low register silky vocals, very seductive, for lack of a better word. And you had Daniel Ash. Daniel Ash was the guitar player, and he ultimately spun off a couple of bands. One was briefly lived, called Tones on Tails, which essentially morphed into Love and Rockets, and Love and Rockets had their own underground dance presence. But for Bauhaus, when their first album came out, there was a song called In the Flat Field. I think it's the opening track of their first album, and it just grabs you right out of the get-go. But I think where they got their notoriety from was a 10-minute live version of a track called Bela Lugosi's Dead. Very eerie, probably terrific in performance. I had a chance to see Peter Murphy play live, but not as part of Bauhaus. And I can only imagine that Bela Lugosi's Dead was a great live in performance track. So moving on to number 6 of my top 10 alternative bands from the 1980s, a band called Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry. And you probably haven't heard too much about them. A guy by the name of Chris Reed was the singer and one of the guitar players, and a gentleman by the name of David Wolfenden, I think, who ultimately went on to play with Sisters of Mercy. But David Wolfenden was the guitar player. Again, heavy wall of sound guitar. Their first two albums were Talk About the Weather and Paint Your Wagon. If you can find them, listen to them. If you're into that kind of dark grunge scene, that's definitely going to be right up your alley. So, lightening up a little bit as we move into our top five. Coming in at number five is the Smiths. Morrissey was the lead singer. Johnny Marr was the guitar player. Johnny Marr, I think, really was one of the quintessential alternative guitarists to come out of the 80s, influenced probably a lot of other bands. When you think about the Smiths, I think there was their initial album was called, I think the Smiths, the second one was called Meat is Murder. And then The Queen is Dead. That was their third album. But crisp, cutting vocals, a lot of arpeggios in the vocals, and just a really, really unique guitar style that led to their success and their notoriety. So kind of love the Smiths, and would like to see some bands come out and kind of take up that space. Staying in the 80s and staying in that same theme. Coming in at number four, Susie and the Banshees. Susie Sue was the lead singer. Steve Severin was the bass player, and Budgie was the drummer. And they had a host of different guitar players. One of which, by the way, was Robert Smith of The Cure, who actually did some live work, performance work, touring work with Susie and the Banshees, and also I think did one or two studio albums with them as well. And a little teaser, because Robert Smith's going to come up a little later in our top 10 list. But they had a couple of albums that came out, and then ultimately they put out an album called Juju, and I just fell in love with that album. Songs like Into the Light, Arabian Nights, Halloween. They were all the guitar sound on that album was just incredible. I mean, it cut like a knife, and Susie Sue had obviously her own unique vocal style that she lent to that band, and it was really kind of her band, so to speak. So Susie and the Banshees, yeah, number four. Moving on to number three, we have Echo and the Bunnymen. Ian McCulloch was the lead singer and probably penned most of the songs for Echo and the Bunnymen. Very, very unique vocal style for him. Their first two albums, Crocodiles was the first album, and Heaven Up Here was the second album. I walked into a boutique record store and saw those two albums, and I literally grabbed them, put them on, and they were in rotation for weeks, where I just listened to one after the other, back to back to back. They ultimately moved on and had some pretty significant success with a song called The Killing Moon. That one may resonate with some of you. But I really like them a lot. And in fact, I had a chance to see them a couple of years ago, 2019. I had a chance to see them in performance again, and it was a good show. All these years later, it was still a very, very good show. So it gets us to our final two. So number two on the top 10 list of top alternative bands of the 1980s. This is going to be a double, kind of like two bands under one. Joy Division and New Order. So Joy Division was... and New Order, Ian Curtis and Bernard Sumner. So Ian Curtis was the lead singer of Joy Division. They put out two albums. Unknown Pleasures was their first album. Closer was their second album. They had the cult hit Love Will Tear Us Apart. Who doesn't recognize that song? But Ian Curtis, unfortunately, took his own life very, very young, in his early 20s. Took his own life, and you thought, well, gee, that's going to be the end of that. But the rest of the band members kind of got back together and said, let's keep going. They changed their name to New Order. Bernard Sumner, the guitar player, wound up singing, and he had his own kind of like a little bit of dark, foreboding singing style. And they had, they put out an album. I think the album was called Movement. That was their first album. And if you listen to Movement, if you listen to Unknown Pleasures and Closer, and then listen to Movement, you would swear it's pretty much the same band, but maybe with a different singer. That first album, Movement, really held on to the dark sense that built Joy Division. And then as they kind of moved forward, they started to branch out and became, I don't want to say more pop oriented, but sort of a little bit more listenable, so to speak. And clearly they had the massive dance club hit Blue Monday, which just kind of blew the walls off of everything for a while. So New Order, yeah, and Joy Division, definitely towards the top of my top 10 list, which brings us to Number one on my top 10 list of alternative bands from the 1980s, and that award goes to The Cure. Robert Smith is the lead singer. He's had and author of all the albums, songwriter, guitar player, singer. A cast of characters have come and gone. Lawrence Tolhurst was kind of one of them. And they put out a couple of albums early on, and then ultimately they came out with their third album, which was called Pornography. And if you were kind of into the dark side of music, Pornography was right up your alley. It just was, not to continue to use the word dark, but it was a deep underground dark sound, a lot of introspection that went into that. Again, unique self-searching vocal styles, unique kind of overwhelming guitar style. And then a few albums later, they came out with an album called Disintegration. And I thought that was a fabulous album as well, much in the vein of their early work. The Cure tended to kind of bounce back and forth. One album would come out and it was like completely dark and underground, and the next album would come out and it was all pop sensibility, which never really kind of made sense to me, but I enjoyed each on their own level. But, albums like Pornography and Disintegration, I love them. And on Disintegration, clearly you had Prayers for Rain, but Pictures of You, which now I hear in car commercials. And I think it speaks for itself that The Cure was ultimately recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails actually did the introduction. I just think that The Cure is a band that has stood the test of time. And that is why they are number one on my top 10 alternative bands from the 1980s list. But that's just my list, and I want to hear what you have to say. So leave some comments in the comments section. What do you agree with and disagree with about my top 10 list, and who's not on my top 10 list that's on yours? So leave them in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button, and I'll see you when I see you.